Next, please welcome Mr. Paul Skoutelas, President and CEO of the American Public Transportation Association, to the stage. Thank you.
Konnichiwa. Yokoso.
Hello, welcome.
Deputy Administrator Mitchell, it's an honor to welcome you to the 2024 APTA GT Rail Symposium. And to all our participants and guests, both here in this room and online, thank you for joining us today. APTA and the Japan International Transport and Tourism Institute have a proud partnership. Our organizations have collaborated for many, many years, bringing together transportation officials from the United States and Japan. This year, we are meeting at a particularly important moment in our bilateral friendship. First, today's symposium is part of the official Cherry Blossom Festival here in Washington. Second, last night, following a full day of meetings, President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden hosted Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and wife Yuko, a state dinner in celebration of one of America's most vital allies. Third, American public transport agencies and international companies are making historic investments in our passenger rail systems, thanks to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. With all of that, I cannot imagine a better, more opportune time for this event. Earlier this week, my organization, APTA, held a 3-day meeting of more than 600 members who are most active in advocating for public transportation. We visited members of Congress to explain how the largest federal investment in transit in American history, more than $200 billion for public transit and passenger and freight rail over 5 years, is not just benefiting major urban centers, but smaller cities, suburbs, and rural towns. We heard from Acting Federal Transit Administrator Veronica Vanderpool and Federal Railroad Administrator Amit Bose, both of whom echoed this message from Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. America would not be what it is today without public transportation. Rail lines brought new western states closer to the rest of the country, and subways helped our biggest cities to grow their populations and become economic powerhouses. Secretary Buttigieg said, "We are returning to our best traditions by making investments that will grow the national economy, strengthen our communities, and change people's lives." Deputy Federal Railroad Administrator Jennifer Mitchell, who will be addressing us later today, is one of the many officials working to achieve the Biden-Harris administration's environmental, social, and fiscal goals by expanding and modernizing our rail network. Our aspirations are high. We know that investing in transit can help America address such issues as affordable housing, cleaner air and water, improved racial and economic equity, and greater access to more opportunities for all. Towards those goals, the Federal Railroad Administration is helping to connect cities and regions with high-performance rail, something Japan led the world in doing 60 years ago when it opened the Shinkansen system. And I had the great fortune and pleasure to ride that system some number of years ago. It is impressive. The U.S. strategy is to begin by focusing on a small number of corridor projects that can advance quickly, while developing a broader picture and pipeline of longer-term projects that will move forward as they become ready. An effective, resilient, and easily accessible passenger rail network represents a missing link in America's overall transportation system. For the first time in more than 150 years, since the first transcontinental railroad united our east and west coasts, the United States has a once-in-a-century opportunity to build that missing link. Amtrak, America's national passenger rail carrier, is expected to become the largest construction program in the United States by 2025. California high-speed rail will connect Los Angeles and San Francisco at speeds up to 220 miles per hour. And the Brightline West high-speed intercity passenger rail system between California and Nevada will serve more than 11 million passengers annually. In North Carolina and Virginia, the Raleigh to Richmond Innovating Rail Program will improve passenger travel and strengthen a critical supply chain for American business. The Long Bridge Project, part of the Transforming Rail in Virginia, will construct a new 2-track rail bridge over the Potomac River to expand passenger rail between Washington, D.C. and Richmond, Virginia for 6 million travelers. And there are many more: Atlanta to Washington, Houston to Dallas, Chicago to St. Louis, Portland to Seattle and to Vancouver, Miami to Orlando, and the list goes on. And this is in addition to all the major commuter, heavy, and light rail projects that have recently opened or are being planned and will make a lasting impact on regional economies and quality of life. These include the East Side Access Project in New York City, providing 40 miles of new tracks, a new terminal beneath Grand Central Station, and the modernization of the busiest intersection of passenger train lines in North America. The Purple Line, a 16-mile light rail line which will connect major suburbs in Maryland outside of Washington, D.C., and provide access to intercity commuter and heavy rail services. The Los Angeles Crenshaw Line, Phase 2, which will ultimately extend to the Los Angeles International Airport. And the recent opening of the Skyline in Honolulu, an 8.9-mile automated light metro rail system. We're also looking forward to new commuter rail lines operating this year in Orlando, Miami, Boston, and new light rail lines in Phoenix and in Seattle. With so much activity, strong interest, and resources, President Biden's vision of world-class passenger rail and ever more robust public transport in America is within our reach. The themes of today's symposium focus on the significant contributions of all forms of rail, from intercity to commuter to heavy and light rail. Let me comment briefly on each of these themes. First, economic value of intercity connections. I cited several examples of rail projects that will connect regional economies and make larger skilled labor markets more accessible. I do want to emphasize the Northeast Corridor. This heavily traveled route carries more than 2,100 passenger trains and 60 freight trains every weekday. This is one of the world's most economically prosperous regions, and it is because of rail connectivity, linking Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. Next, attractiveness of our cities. Healthy, attractive cities and vibrant public transport networks go hand in hand. The future of cities will rely on modern, efficient public transportation. Intercity rail hubs in central downtown areas will generate investment. They'll grow businesses and attract residents and revenue-generating events, thereby making these cities more desirable. Sustainability. In the United States, the transportation sector is the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Public transportation and intercity passenger rail are fundamental to making and mitigating the effects of climate change. Use of public transit reduces carbon emissions by 55% compared to driving an automobile, and our use of electricity in rail operations is becoming more efficient. 16% better for heavy rail compared to 1995, and 25% better for light rail. Resilience. Risk assessments of both natural and man-made challenges have led to new standards and guidelines. But this is an area that requires constant vigilance and continuous improvement. From increasingly powerful storms to extreme temperatures and from cyber threats and terrorism, planning and preparation are essential to ensure many decades of return on investment. We have an exciting program planned for you today, and we are eager to get started. So let me conclude by expressing my sincere gratitude for our collaborative partnership with JITTI. Thank you, Mr. Chair. During this time of challenge and unprecedented opportunity, we can learn a great deal from each other and at this symposium. There are many changes coming to public transport in America, but what stays the same is that the enormous value that public transportation brings to our cities and our communities, and the enormous value that APTA and JITTI and that relationship that we have brings to both of our countries. Thank you so much for being here today.